Hey everybody, Mean Joe from Balsa USA. We've had a lot of questions come up on Oratex and how it works for covering. So we're going to cover a quick video here on how to do that. First, you're going to lay out your material. You're going to get the amount you need. It doesn't have to be exact. You've got plenty of space to work with, and any extra that you don't use, you'll be able to cut off later. We suggest using a straight edge and make the line that you need, and then just going back over it with a sharp hobby knife. You want to have lots of hobby knives on hand. They want to be as sharp as they can get, and they dull really quickly. So you're going to want to have a stash of hobby blades on hand. You can use either number 11 blades like we are here, or you can also use just regular razor blades. Just make sure you've got a good supply of those on hand. Once you get your covering cut to the size you want to make sure that you're using the right side. The dull side on Oratex is going to be the non-adhesive side, and the shiny side is going to be the side with the adhesive on it. So once you get that, you lay it down, and what you're going to do is you're going to tack around the edges of your project. They recommend a iron temperature of 188 degrees to 200 degrees, and just go from there. The glue adheres really quickly at a lower temperature. We're only using 189 degrees here, and it tacked down very, very well. We didn't have any issues at all. Now once you've got it tacked down around the edges, you're going to go through and tack it the rest of the way down. We suggest moving from the leading edge back to the trailing edge. This wing will be a little different than some of the other ones you have, because this does have scalloped edges and is a one-piece wing. So as you can see, as we pull this around here, you'll be able to start seeing the shape of the scallops, and we will talk about how we get around the scallops here in just a little bit for those of you that have never done it. We did find that the Oratex stretches really well. We didn't have any issues at all making the corners. The compound corners and compound edges all seem to work very nicely. The tack strength on this glue is much better than the previous product that we carried. Makes it super easy to get it ironed down. Again, you want to make sure you use a sharp hobby knife for this, or a sharp razor blade, to make sure your cuts are nice and clean. You want to give yourself a little bit of edge. We're usually working on at about 1/4 of an inch or less, to make sure you've got plenty of material to pull around the edges. You can see this process is fairly simple. After you've had a little bit of practice, you'll be covering up to your 3rd scale airplanes very easily. A quick tack job around the corners to get it set. Again, our iron is set here at 189.9 degrees. Here we're stretching the film around the corner. We wanted to try both the iron and the heat gun. We found out in our testing that the heat gun works a little bit easier, but the iron actually does a really good job as well. When you're pulling this around to stretch over that compound curve, the heat gun just seems to work just a little bit better. But again, if you don't have a heat gun handy, you can use the iron and it works just fine. It just takes a little bit more finesse and a little bit more work to get it smoothed out over the corners. Here you can see the difference using the heat gun. The heat gun seems to do a little bit better of a job around the corner. We do recommend to use a leather glove on this part, because it's very easy to burn your fingers. This does get quite hot. And as you can see, It really stretches around the compound corners very easily. The heat gun, it almost just lays it right down flat. So it takes much less finesse and much less work to get it down like you'd like it. Then what you do is you just go in and trim off the extra excess material that you have. Again, using a sharp hobby knife or razor blade. You want to give yourself about 1/4 of an inch. You can cut this fairly close to the wood and not cause yourself any issues because you're just going to iron over the corners anyways. What you're going to want to do when you put these together is you're going to want to have the other side of the covering overlap. So you want to make sure you give yourself a little bit of extra on both the top and the bottom of the wing so that you can get a good edge. So now we're going to take a straight edge and we're just going to use the straight edge to make the cut nice and clean along the leading edge of the wing. You can see we've wrapped the covering all around the leading edge of the wing, and we're going to cut this off a little bit long so that when we put the top side of the covering down, it will overlap. You want to try to make that cut as straight as possible just so you get a clean edge between your top and your bottom. Here you can see the edge. It's very clean. Just use a metal straight edge ruler to make that cut and you should be good to go. You can tell here from this angle we've got about 1/4 of an inch of overlap. Here we're just cleaning up that edge a bit. Now this was the end that we used the iron on. You could tell by the previous shot that the heat gun end actually worked just a little bit better. Again, this wasn't a problem. You can go back in and clean it up with the iron. It just cleaned up so much nicer and easier with the heat gun. Now they're going to line this up here and finish their straight edge cut to give a nice clean edge all the way down. Please mind the fingers. There you go. So you can see here that the end rib kind of got broke there. It's really super simple to fix, and don't worry about this. We are dealing with balsa, so it does break relatively easy. If you do happen to break a rib or crack a piece, just go back in with a little thin CA and doctor it up. Quick and easy repair, and it's just as good as new. So now what we're going to do is we're going to trim along the edge of the scalloped edge. We're just going to make a nice straight line. No need to mark it or use a ruler on this because we're going to be folding those edges over anyway into the scallops. So you just trim off the excess. And then here in a second, so you just trim off the excess and that should be good enough. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and take care of these scallops. So if you just go in and make some small cuts along the edges, then this makes it easy to make that curve. You make a few cuts along there, and then you just go back through with your iron and iron those cuts down and around the corner. You can see it takes the shape of the scallop really easy. You just want to make sure that you don't go too deep with your cuts because then they will be visible along your trailing edge. And this process will just repeat all the way down the wing on both sides. So now that we've got that part done, we're gonna flip it over to the other side and pretty much repeat the same process to the other side. Again, you're going to put the shiny side towards the wood. Get everything lined up like you like it. Make sure it's going to fit your piece, and then go through and just tack it down. And again, this is going to be the same process as you had on the other side. You're going to tack down the edges, and you're going to go back and iron it down. We did find that the Oratex stretches really good, and the tack adhesive on this is much better than the product that we used to carry. It really doesn't take much heat, and it tacks it right down. Here you can see we're going to go through and do the wingtips. Again, we did find that we had better luck with the heat gun around the compound corners than we did the iron. Again, both worked okay, but the heat gun just seemed to pull around the corner much easier with the heat gun option versus the iron. So now we're going to go through and trim the covering just like we did the last time. Make sure you have a clean and sharp hobby knife or razor blade, and it's exactly the same process as you did before. You're going to cut this out. You're going to give yourself about 1/4 inch or so, and you're going to iron down the seam. You should not need any extra adhesive on the corner. I know some folks tend to put that down there, but in our testing, it wasn't something that we would have to have, so we didn't do that. I suppose if you wanted to, it would make no difference at all. You could put a little bit of poly tack down to cover your seams better, but I really think this adheres really well, and I don't see that it would be necessary. Now, here's an important part. You have to make sure that you don't cut in to the other covering while you're cutting this cut. So you want to pull it out a little bit and cut straight down versus cutting up against the balsa, because if you cut up against the balsa, you're going to cut your other covering. So you want to be very careful with this process not to cut your other covering, or the guy helping you. So be very careful. And then it's just a matter of trimming off, just like we did on the other side, and iron that around the corner for your seam. Now what you'll see here as we iron around the corner, that seam across there will virtually disappear. The seams on this covering do very well. There's plenty of adhesive properties to it, and it sticks to itself very, very well. You can see as we work around the edges here, that line just virtually disappears. So now we're going to go through the same process again on the scalloped edges. We're just going to cut slits in the covering so that we can roll it around the corner and match it up with the other covering. And then we're going to iron those seams around. Now on the other side, you're probably going to want to leave yourself a little bit extra covering when you cut cut along your edges, especially for the scallops. You want to make sure that you can get all the way around that corner so they get good and sealed. Again, we're going to use the same exact process for the other side. And here's a nice up-close view of how the corners look. These weren't the best corners starting out, and we took the heat gun in, and we do again suggest that you use a heat glove. These get hot very quickly, and you can see there on the edges that it's super easy to bump that with a little bit of heat and smooth it right out. It works perfectly. Make sure you keep your heat gun moving. Don't hold it in one spot very long because you can melt right through the covering. And you can smooth that whole corner out nice and easy, and it works perfectly. So overall, we are very pleased with Oratex and the way it performs in our tests. It is going to be fuel proof, it is going to be paintable, and we see no issues at all. We believe this is going to be a fantastic replacement for our covering, and we hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and happy building.